right, we are good to go, and I'll start sharing my screen in just a moment. Here we go.
Excellent. If you guys are not speaking, can you go to mute? We're getting a little bit of feedback, and I tend to shut down when I hear my own voice. Welcome to the Chamblee Downtown Development Authority meeting for Tuesday, May 25th, 2021. We will do the call to order. I have randomly written down everyone's name. Van.
Here.
Brian. Thumbs up. Jonathan.
Yep, here.
Leslie. I saw her. I know she's here. She's talking, but she's on mute. Hello, Leslie. Andy.
Here.
And Ronnie. I see Ronnie. Ronnie is here.
Ronnie told me to make sure our next meeting is in person. She hates Zoom.
Good news, we get to discuss that. Moving on. Approval of minutes. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the regular meeting minutes for April 27th, 2021? And if so, do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting of April 27, 2021.
Second.
Second. All in favor, Van?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Jonathan?
Aye.
Leslie?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Ronnie? While she works that out, we will move on. Executive session minutes from April 27th, 2021. Has everyone had a chance to review? And do we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the minutes from the executive session of April 27th, 2021.
We have a second.
Second.
We have a second. Van?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Jonathan?
Aye.
Leslie?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Ronnie? Strong silence. Moving on, the chair's report. Nothing really to report. I think, yes, I do have something to report. We had discussed, myself, some of the council, going to council meetings on a regular basis and giving a kind of regular, call it quarterly update. I think that's probably important that we do that. I volunteer myself to go to council. There is an opportunity for the DDA and other boards, associated with the city to get up, talk about what's going on, give general updates. I know we all do that together, separately. We all have our own discussions, but it's probably a good idea just to get on a regular schedule and push that forward, talk about what's going on, give them the opportunity to ask questions. So just wanted to put that on everyone's radar. I don't know how quickly we'll do that, but I would imagine the next couple months we'll start doing a regular quarterly update.
I think that's a great idea. Hello?
Yep, we hear you.
I didn't want to cut anybody off. I think that's a great idea. Here's a question though. So will you be discussing upcoming or notifying of upcoming things, or about things that have already occurred that we've already voted on?
I think that's generally open to discussion and interpretation. I was thinking about just giving general updates on current events, whether they're very near current or very recently passed.
Okay.
probably more along the lines of our property dispositions, the projects that we're working on, sort of thing. Obviously not discussing things that are, related to real estate
Mhm.
transactions and stuff that
Mhm.
we can't talk about in public, but thoughts? Good opportunity for me to get skewered by the council.
No.
Can't wait. That's all I had to report. So just want to give you guys an update. If there are things that you guys think that we should touch on, certainly let me know. But it'll probably be pretty similar to our properties update that we go through. Moving on to the financial report. Sorry, was there a question? Financial report, budget amendment consideration.
Yeah, so I don't know if everyone's had a chance to look at the balance sheet and the financials, but I didn't note any material changes. So I think we can just jump into subparagraph A and B that we have in the agenda, unless anyone has any questions or comments.
Nope.
I did have a note, probably for Laura, on the budget versus actuals. And this kind of ties into a discussion that Laura, Brian, and I had a couple weeks ago. Our pilot payments aren't received until the end of the calendar year. And so we have a parenthetical in that second line item that says not received until December 2020. That's probably 21 at this point for this calendar year. But we're also going to look at getting a forecast put together, so we know, obviously that's our big revenue stream, are those pilot payments. And since they don't come in until essentially one lump sum at the end of the year, we want to make sure that we don't get over our skis with expenses before we get that paid. So we'll get the forecast together and share it with the group over the next couple of weeks.
Excellent. Thank you.
So the budget amendments we talked about at the last meeting, I think, it involves that $80,000 grant that I think we were having Dan maybe dig into a little bit. And as long as everything is kosher with us using that money, I think we're going to, I'd suggest papering an amendment to the budget. So I don't know if at this point we turn it over to Dan to see if he's had a chance to look at that issue.
Dan, you're muted.
Yeah, I got an alarm here that said I was muted, but what I was saying was I have started but not completed that. And I'm, my thinking about it hasn't changed since the last time. My recollection is that the provision is there if the city has to make a payment and we have funds to reimburse, then we reimburse. But I'm not, I've got to get some figures about that. We've been tied up with all the other things that are going on, and I haven't had a chance to get out a spreadsheet on it.
Okay, well, I would suggest we revisit this at the next meeting rather than going and kind of just delaying that amendment, the formality.
Would you like to have a call in the next week sometime about it? I can get on top of it then and we can go over it.
Sure, whatever works with your schedule.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's clear this. I'll ask Jeanette to set up a call for us.
Okay.
Happy to join as well.
Okay, I only have one question on this topic. So that would be adding on the revenue side. Are we discussing what that's going to be spent on the expense side, or is this just a budget amendment to add in the $80,000?
So I can answer that. Last meeting, I had made some suggestions on where we would put the expense side of things. And we can talk about those a little further as well, one-on-one, or revisit that next month on where we had talked about doing that. And Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I don't think it's whether or not we can accept the $80,000. I think that's we're good on that. I think it's whether or not moving forward, if there's an obligation from the city to continue with supporting the debt service, basically. Is that correct?
Well, if you're asking whether the city is, the city's obligation is to pay the bonds. And that is offset to the extent that we make deposits into the debt service fund with our money. And the issue is whether we have to go ahead, as I understand it, is whether we have to go ahead and do that now. But again, I have not been able to get the spreadsheet put together yet, so I can't speak definitively on it.
Okay. I do know from a CPA standpoint, we're not obligated to make an amendment to the budget, but I do think it's probably best practice if we're going to receive it to make that amendment.
All right, we'll come back. Rob and Jonathan and I'll get together and talk about it next week. And you?
Great. I will see you then.
And I think we also want to hold off on the expense side of things until we get a more accurate forecast, so we know what's coming in and where we can spend those dollars. So it's
Okay, that sounds good.
moving on. DDA properties update.
Rob, did you want to talk about refi at all?
Oh, sorry, skipped over that.
I'm going to defer to Laura on that. I haven't dug into the loan docs.
I think that was a van thing, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, Van, I'm happy to jump in too, but do you want to go ahead?
Well, I mean, I thought we were going to invite Piedmont to come have a conversation. That's why I emailed you asking if they had been invited to this meeting.
I'm
I
sorry.
apologize. We've got a lot of balls in the air, so that slipped through. We do
we
need
can-
to.
Then
do need to-
I would suggest that we table this to next month, because I mean, I can't talk intelligently about what their view is. I think we need the bank themselves to say, here's the situation, so that we know what the obligation is, and you know how we can get a better rate than what we're paying now.
Yeah, so I think that's probably a pretty good summary. I mean, basically, we need to take a look at our debt capacity.
If you would like, I'd be glad to. I didn't realize that I needed to run with this, but you know, I know you've got a lot on your plate. I'd be glad to run with this and go schedule for our next meeting to have someone from the bank make a presentation.
If you don't mind, that'd be great. The blame's on me. I just let it slip, so I apologize.
No worries. It's all right.
Just to prep the board, you know, we've got a lot of things coming up that you know, I'd like the DDA to participate in, town center, basically. So we need to just figure out what's the best strategy going forward, and you know, do we need to pay down debt? Do we need to refi debt? Or you know, what's the approach that we need to take strategically looking forward as we go into our property dispositions, which is probably a good segue.
All right, do I need to make a motion to move this to next month? Or is that just administrative?
I think that's just administrative, isn't it? Or sorry, Dan, I didn't realize.
If we don't take any action, then we're not taking any action. You don't have to remove it from the agenda.
The DDA properties update, I really want to kind of table this until the executive session. We've got our two properties that are for sale, and there are several kind of balls in the air with that you know, I'd like to update everybody, but this probably isn't the right forum. Positive news, everything seems to be moving forward, but again, kind of slower than we'd like. Old business, going into Pruitt Health. We have invited the folks back from Pruitt. They came to us more than a year ago, 15, 16 months ago. COVID hit. COVID had an impact. COVID had an impact on everybody. And this project kind of got put on hold. They have since gone back to the city and resubmitted with new revised plans for their project. That's really kind of a phased approach to what they are going to be building. So they're going to give us a quick update on the things that have changed. They're going to give us an update on the things that haven't. I know there were some discussions about, what the DDA should be thinking about going forward. I'll leave that open to discussion, but really from my standpoint, I feel like nothing has changed from the abatement side because this was really about the jobs. If that has not changed, then I don't really feel like the abatement should change, but that's really the onus is on Pruitt to kind of tell us what's going on and what's happened. And then again, I'd turn it over to the board to see what they think, but glad to see this project's continuing to move forward. Glad to see this is, going to be breaking ground soon. Not too many folks can say that about Class A office projects breaking ground and moving forward in this environment. So turn it over to whether it's Chris or Tyler.
I'm going to try to make whoever is going to be presenting allow them to share the screen. So if I can identify that person.
It's Chris Scott.
Okay. Are you able to share your screen as is?
Let's see. Host disabled participant screen sharing is what it says right now.
All right, I'm going to punt over a host over to you for a second. See if that'll change it. Does that allow you to share your screen?
Yes.
Okay, and if you can just share it back when you're done, that would be great.
Okay. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate everybody. Chris Scott, I think I've met most of you, and Tyler Arnold with Pruitt, their Chief Development Officer, who's also involved back when we were with you guys a year and a half plus ago. So yeah, it's been an interesting ride for everybody, but it's really given Pruitt some time, and I am going to switch over in a second and share some slides to kind of give a really good description and visuals on kind of what has changed. But really, we came in front of you guys late 19. The DCI with City Council was approved in November of 2019. We were starting to schematic plans with our architect, and then March happened, and Pruitt specifically being on the front lines of COVID, it rocked their world, and they really focused on their business for numerous months. But what it also gave Pruitt time to do was to really dig in and look at the building that they really wanted to build. The building that we had gotten approved in 2019 had significant growth that was space that was not going to be occupied for many, many years and was not counted at all in the actual employee numbers that we shared with you. They hired numerous consultants that came in and really looked at their workforce, that looked how they occupy space, use space, and really have redesigned a building that will house what they need today in the 536 employees that we shared with you before. So there's no change in the number of employees. It's actually the same exact people. There may have been some new hires and some people that have left, but it's the same number of folks moving from Norcross. The 100% of the corporate headquarters, just like before, is moving from Norcross to Chamblee, and they're still super excited about that. So with that being said, hey guys, please interrupt, stop. We'll answer any questions you guys have along the way. But I thought it'd be helpful to show what was previously approved. This was the 2.8 acre site. This shows the 197,000 square foot office building. It shows that 4 or 5 level parking deck that was on the site before. This was the rendering of the previous building that was previously approved.
What was the square footage?
197,000 feet. And so really going back to this wing, almost the entire left side wing was almost going to be mothballed and not used initially by Pruitt. From a cost perspective, there's an argument to go ahead and build square footage now, but not knowing if they need it, being able to phase it in the future, and I'll show you that in a minute. So this is the plan today. This is the plan that was approved by City Council in April. This is 125,000 square feet with a surface parking. You'll see the architecture, but same uses, same restaurant, same setbacks along Malone and Peachtree. The same team was involved, Kimley Horn, Nelson, and really designed what we're excited about. I think it's actually a better architectural building. They've got 5 different terraces and balconies that kind of are on different floors throughout the building, on the front, back, top. That art logo that's on the front, above kind of that logo, there's a terrace, and actually below that, there's a terrace, and there's a terrace on the backside. So really, these new architectural features really break up the building, and I think give it even a better feel than was there before. One thing that you guys had some questions on before as well, in 2019, Greenstone was going to own the building, lease it to Pruitt, and Pruitt was going to have purchase options, and their anticipated goal is to buy it over the next 3 to 7 years. That's changed. Now Greenstone is acting as their developer. Pruitt is closed on the site, and Pruitt will own this building from day one. I think that's a good thing for you guys, and I think it's a good thing for Chamblee. They're really putting their roots in the community.
Can you talk about why that's relevant for an owner standpoint? How does that hit their balance sheet? You know, that kind of stuff.
I'm sorry, Rob, ask that question one more time.
How does that impact Pruitt's balance sheet? Just in general, tell us why that is better from a city standpoint versus having a developer doing a sale leaseback.
I'll let you, Tyler, answer balance sheet stuff, but I think from a Roots perspective, instead of them signing a 10, 15, or 20-year lease, and then at the end of that time, they maybe reevaluate at this juncture. I mean, they're doing things to this building you would never do if you're a lease tenant. You wouldn't put this many balconies. We wouldn't have let them. This building is going to be a lot more expensive. Things like the generator, things like wanting to bury all power lines. Just, I think the aesthetics and the money they're going to spend in this building is a building that Pruitt plans on being here for, I mean, generations. I mean, this is Neil Pruitt's kind of signature corporate headquarters. And I think if you're leasing a building, you kind of treat it, maybe cut some corners, and there are no corners being cut in this project.
I'll kind of answer that question just because it was a leading question, but basically this puts that obligation solely on Pruitt's balance sheet. They can always sell their property to somebody, basically what's called a sale leaseback. That was the original structure as I understand it, that Greenstone would basically be the owner. And all that really says is Pruitt is literally dropping their capital into this property, into this building. I don't know how they're financing it, but it is an anchor. It is a commitment. It would be much more advantageous from a balance sheet standpoint to only lease the building and free up that capital so they could go do other things. But it does speak to Pruitt's commitment to Chamblee. Just my 2 cents.
I agree. Tyler, do you want to add anything there, or do you want me to keep going?
I agree. I was a little nervous there if I was going to have to speak about balance sheets. I'm a lawyer by trade, so there's, but we are really excited. We are committed. Echo Rob's sentiment. We're making this what we really want it to be and make it home for us. So that's all I'll say unless called upon again.
I'll go through a few more of these. So that was really, that's the plan for today. It was important for Pruitt in this process, this DCI process, and really spending time with City Council, trying to get the ability to grow this building over time. Since they're planting the roots to be able to grow over the next, we have the ability to do it over the next 10 years. to expand this building as Pruitt grows or needs growth. That was an important piece of this, to at least have that ability and flexibility. So what you'll see next really grows back to the initial footprint. It's actually more office square footage that we could potentially do. You'll see there's a phase 2A, which is more the initial wing, and there's also a phase 2B at the bottom right. And that's 2 levels of parking deck, but then 3 levels of office on top of it. So it gets us the ability to get up to 275,000 feet. So potentially it could be a larger building than even before. It kind of just shows you the phase 1 and phase 2, A and B again. And then it goes back to a building that looks somewhat similar, still lots of balconies and breaking up, same architecture, but it just goes back to the same footprint that we had back in 2019. I'll go back to this one since that's what we're planning on today. I do think it's important what we really focused on with you guys and really dug into and understood and people counted. The employee number has not changed at all. We're very comfortable, and the MOU that you guys have revised is very specific and really holds Pruitt's feet to the fire on actually having these employees here and showing you guys these employees here. And they're comfortable with all of that. Nothing's changed for Pruitt. It's just right sizing the building, not building that excess space. And these folks will be moving here day one and growing into this building over that 3-year period as you guys had outlined in the initial MOU.
Hey, Chris, I have a quick question. My name's Jonathan Smith. I'm new to the board, so playing catch up on some of this. Where you have the cafe signage there, is that going to be a third-party restaurant of some sort? Or are you leasing that to a third-party tenant?
Pruitt will run the restaurant, but it is open to the public per our DCI. It is open to the public. They'll run a breakfast and lunch operation out of there.
Okay.
From an operator perspective, they don't know who it'll be yet, but that is part of our DCIs that will be open to the public.
Got it. Thanks.
And this probably goes without saying, but just the excitement that Pruitt has coming, that this is actually going to be a reality. We're getting through COVID. We've released architects, schematic design. We're full steam ahead. The game plan is to start early early next year from a construction perspective, and it's about a year plus construction project. So sometime in 2023, Pruitt would open, move into the building, and just what you guys have done in Chamblee is amazing. The restaurants, the retail, the housing options that Pruitt plans to enjoy, being across the street from MARTA to access kind of a younger employee base and hiring in this community is something that's the draw. That's the reason they're coming to your city. So I think that's all I want to share. I'd love to answer any questions. And
So
I have a couple of questions. As far as the number of jobs go, does the description of those jobs vis-a-vis part-time, full-time, work from home, not work from home, that's going to change? I'm
No.
going to assume? No.
No, it may be from a part-time perspective. No, these are all full-time employees. Pruitt just has folks that travel. So just like any company, folks will be traveling on certain days of the week or certain weeks. They'll be in the office, certain weeks they won't be in the office. But all these employees will call this office home and have a place within the building that they would call their home.
Okay.
What
so
percentage of time would you assume that most of your staff will be there?
Tyler, I'll let you answer that one.
That's really a tough one to answer, Brian. We're a regional company across 4 states, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And so on a rotational basis, some people are out in the field one week, back in the office other weeks. We do intend to host conferences and bring everyone from the field in leadership from our various facilities, that sort of thing. So there are days in which we may have more than 550. But at this,
No,
I'd be making up a number right now, Brian, if I
I,
told you.
I
percentage.
understand, and I'd be interested in seeing if you could quantify that. I mean, I work for a large international corporation, and out of our Kennesaw office, there are several hundred inspectors who are assigned to the office that may be in that office a week a year, 2 weeks a year. And my interest is the number of jobs or the number of people who are working in downtown Chamblee every day as a way of bringing people to downtown Chamblee every day. And so while jobs assigned to a building is one thing, but I'm really interested in what's your average population going to be every day?
I can supplement that. I don't want to misrepresent, and I can get that to you quickly, but I am confident that it is a vast majority that will, because we have billers, we have our finance team, and that's a majority of the folks, our IT team. So if it's all right, implement that, Brian, for you.
Yes,
So,
that's just fine. Go ahead, Van.
yeah, my question is, if I'm understanding what, and I don't know what, I lost the screen.
Do you want that back up?
Well, no, I guess it's okay. You don't have to put it back up. But based on what you were just showing us with different phases, and I don't know what city council approved or didn't approve or all that, but I have in my notes that one of the things besides the jobs that we, the reason we wanted to participate was that first level of the parking deck was going to be open to the public. So I'm confused because it looks like the parking deck's not going to be in phase one. Am I
That's correct.
misunderstanding? So where are all these people going to park?
The Pruitt folks?
Yeah.
Tyler?
Trying to get off mute. So we do have a contract, or we're negotiating a contract with MARTA across the street to allow some parking there. And so they'll be coming from across the street.
So
and then we also
the
hope that-
first level of open parking deck that y'all promised would be available to the general public is not going to be there in phase one. And is it going to even be there once phase two is built?
That's not part of our approved DCI.
Okay. So that means that what we approved, getting that parking, is no longer available. And I'm cool with that. But that means we need to reassess what we offered you, because now what we offered you is not in line with what you're giving.
That, in my mind, was never part of the DDA. It was jobs. So it was not
in
part
my
of.
notes that we discussed it, that we wanted that. I made the motion to approve the abatement, and that was part of what I wanted. So I'm not saying that we're not going to have a deal here, but we need to have a discussion as a DDA, because now there's a substantial difference to what we approved.
Well, my understanding in talking to Dan and Rob and you guys over the last year and a half, that jobs are important to Chamblee. And that's what this was.
Absolutely. I'm
what this
100%
all
on board.
about.
We want those jobs.
And that's what this was all about. So that is news to me, that that's something you would want to table this or do something different because of a couple parking spaces people may or may not use.
Well, I mean, I'm
And-
just saying
and-
that was
and regardless of
part of the
that-
conversation. I
And
mean,
regardless of that, that's not something that council asked us to do this time. It wasn't even part of a
understand, but
conversation with council.
I'm not on council. I don't have the authority to do what council does.
And council is not granting the abatement. It's the
Yeah, the
DDA.
council's not granting the abatement. You asked me for abatement. I'm willing to give an abatement. I'm the one that motioned for it. But you know, there's a change to what you offered. And now all I'm saying is we as the DDA need to discuss that change. It may be that we say, hey, that's no big deal, but you can't expect me to just say, oh, well, great. All right, let's move on without having a discussion with my peers. Not to mention, in the motion, we authorized David Carter to have a conversation to set up an MOU. David Carter's not here anymore, and I haven't seen any signed MOU. So I don't know what the MOU even says.
We have a revised MOU that our attorney's reviewing right now.
Okay. Well, and that's good.
Revised by
I
who?
haven't seen it.
Revised by who?
We did a revision based on a couple of things, at least I did a revision, based on a conversation with the company about some changes. And since I didn't have project information, I'm looking at the revised MOU now. I found a description of the project, which I think was in the city land use approvals. And the current version has, along with parking for 550 provided by parking deck with limited surface parking spaces at the rear of the site, which was lifted right out of that city document. Now, we haven't, in fairness to the company, we haven't received comments back on that. I don't know whether that's right or wrong, but that's what was sent out for review.
We did notice that, and we're making comments and changing that to what was approved by council.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying is, you know, if there's a change like that, and it sounds like there was some language in the MOU, we need to fine tune this. And personally, I can't speak for the rest of the DDA members. I'd like to, and Dan, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'd like to re-motion this so that we can have it all nice and clean. I feel like it's gotten a little muddy because it's been a year and a half since this happened, and now there's a change to the project from when we approved this. I'm still okay with doing a $6 million abatement. That's what we approved.
But I agree, the language does need to reflect what we've talked about.
Yeah.
And as well, I do think that parking, co-parking, I guess is what you might call it, could be addressed, because I kind of think that the parking in the parking deck that would have been available to the public would probably only be used at night. So, you know, maybe that can be reflected as well in the language.
Dan, can you clarify what that revised MOU states as far as, because I couldn't find in my notes. I see in my notes that we approved a $6 million abatement, but I don't see at what percentage. Does the MOU detail what percentage we were giving?
At years 1 through 15, or a 55% abatement, capped at $6 million plus the amount of our admin payments for the duration of the lease.
Well, see, this is another reason why I think I'd like to re-motion it, because I'd rather change that because that's a 15-year abatement, and that, you know, I'd rather go with a 70% abatement and shrink it down to about 7 or 8 years.
So I'm going to jump in here. We dusted off the MOU that we started with 12 plus months ago. It's only taken one turn. It's in the developer's hands. Like Dan said, we haven't gotten comments back. And this is our first discussion after they've gone through the process with council in the city to get their revised project. I think these are all important questions and an important conversation, but let's just make sure we're making it a productive one. So I agree with you, Van. I don't like the idea of a 15-year abatement. I would like there to be a little more conversation around this with the developer and get some of their thoughts on the structure, but we have not, we're still pretty early in this 15-month process.
I can make one comment, and I think, Van, you may help me here too. I think where we were with the 15 years is we had asked if it could be something like 70%. I don't know what it was, 70 or 75%. But I think it was important at that time to be more like 55%. And so we'd kind of work together to say, I think y'all's intent was to allow us to use the 6 million. So we just wanted enough time at 55% to be able to use the 6 million. I think you guys maybe did a model. This is a long time ago, so bear with me if I'm not telling the whole truth. This is what I remember, but I think it was going to take at 55% to get to 6 million. It was going to take 10, 11, 12 years. And so I think 15 years was kind of a number. Said, okay, by the end of 15 years, that 6 million will be used. I think if you guys went to 70% and it only took 7 years, or 8 years, whatever that is, that works just fine for Pruitt as well.
That's good feedback. Thank you.
Is that, do you remember any of that, Van? I think
Yeah, that's exactly what I remember. And I would feel more comfortable. And again, I can only speak for myself and not the other DDA members. I would feel more comfortable structuring in a way where it gets used up at a faster pace and y'all back on the tax rolls for city council to spend that money how they wish. And if you do a 70, and here's another question. Now that y'all are changing the project scope, the projected cost of development back then was $79 million. Now that you're doing this in phases, that also changes stuff, because are you telling me that phase one is not going to be $79 million, right?
Right. The number that we've given you guys is 50.
Yeah, so that changes everything, because now you're talking about, you know, a smaller total valuation, which means that the taxes collected is going to be smaller, which means that my $6 million motion gets spread out even further. You know, am I missing something here, Dan, or am I correct in my thought?
You can look
I
at
agree
it
with
this
you.
way, that $6 million is a larger percentage of
Yeah,
50 than it is 80.
yeah. So I Rob, at the end of the day, you're the chairman, but my suggestion is let's have that conversation and sit down with Chris and Tyler or whoever else and try to figure out what the correct structure is. Again, my original statement was I want the jobs. I absolutely want the jobs, and I don't have a problem giving you $6 million. But right now it's a mess, in my opinion. It's messy because it's different. It's not what we approved. We approved a project valuation of $79 million, and that's not what we're getting.
Yeah, rough numbers, and don't quote me on this, but it gets you 10 years at a 70, never mind.
I think
You can get there.
I think the conversation needs to be held with the developer to figure that out and then bring it back to next month's meeting.
So do we need a motion for that? Do we need a
Well,
motion to authorize the
let's-
chair?
I think there's more discussion here.
I think there's
Okay.
more discussion. I know from my standpoint, with a smaller project without the cost of structured parking, I mean, to me, the $6 million was associated with the larger project and the number of jobs. And so with a smaller project, without the cost of structured parking, without all of that, to me, this is no longer a $6 million abatement. And I don't know what that number is, but that's one of the things that I would like to consider.
You could do a proportional amount, whatever the drop in project valuation is, drop the 6 million proportionally.
I mean, roughly 195,000 square feet to 125,000 square feet is about 60% in round numbers. You know, 60% of 6 million. That seems the right range, but I'm open to discussion on that.
Yeah, look, for me, this was always about jobs and not about the size of the project. If anything, I prefer the smaller scale, the smaller scope. Look, I do not want to lose an opportunity to get a great tenant, and not that they're not going to build this project, they probably will. But that just does not seem right to me. COVID has had a serious impact on a lot of businesses. This is our opportunity to really take advantage of a bad situation over the last several months and help one of our future, you know, long-term, hopefully, businesses really establish themselves here, bring jobs here. I mean, this is not a multifamily project. You know, this is not some generic mixed use thing going down the street. This is a real job generator, and something that I think we should take some serious consideration. I think the discussion is healthy and needed, but that, my opinion is, the jobs are staying the same, and they have to prove that. But that should probably keep us pretty much in line with where we were originally. That's my opinion.
Well, and I agree with you, but I don't think that it is, I don't think that this is something that we can vote on tonight. I still think that to Van's, questions, et cetera, and concerns, I think all the points that have been made are very valid. But I do think that we need to rethink the language, possibly rethink the numbers, and including the amount of time, including the amount for the abatement, and clean it up.
One thing I wanted to note that came to mind was associated with the reduced parking. It seems like the cafe, one of the intents was for it to serve the public and be a public benefit. So I'm curious as to, with the reduced parking, will there be reserved parking to serve the public for that benefit?
Yes, there'll be visitor parking that'll be there for folks that are coming to the restaurant.
Okay, yeah, if you have numbers, a site plan or something like that, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah,
What would
basically,
be designated
parking.
reserved for cafe use versus visiting the office building versus executive use only, that type of thing.
a parking ratio. And do you guys know what that ratio was on your 197 versus your 125
From a cafe parking,
from the total office parking?
you know, it decreased from 500 to, actually I have these numbers right here. It was a reduction of 452 spaces.
Oh.
And one reason for that, I think it's important probably for you guys to hear. So when they didn't necessarily need all those, but one of our big things from a Greenstone perspective, owning the building and leasing it to Pruitt, God forbid something bad happened, we have to release that building. And we weren't willing to build a building without 3 per 1,000 parking. And so Neil Pruitt hated it, didn't like it, didn't want all that parking. But we just said, look, if we're going to finance this and own it, and you may leave in year one, God forbid, we've got to have a building that doesn't have a lot of terraces, is not specific to you. We got to have a normal floor plate. We can't, I mean, and these are all things that they're doing now that are specific to them that make all the sense in the world for a corporate HQ that they're going to own. That's one main reason that parking deck was so big, when they didn't feel like they needed the spaces.
Do you know what the new parking ratio is?
Oh boy, let's see. It is about just under 1 per 1,000. And a lot of that's, I mean, your ordinance actually, believe it or not, calls for, we could have 0 parking. I guess a handicap, but just because of where it is with MARTA.
Yep.
So with where MARTA is, Pruitt felt comfortable with that number.
You know, I don't know how far down the road you've gotten with MARTA yet, but do you know what that agreement looks like as far as term and number of spaces that you're looking like you're going to get? Is it a long-term parking deal, short-term?
I'd have to follow up with you on that.
Is MARTA talking about giving you spaces on your side of the railroad tracks or on the other side of the railroad tracks? Because they got the big parking lot on the other side, on the new Peachtree side. So is that where they're going to park you?
I believe that's where they're going to park us.
Okay. You know, if MARTA doesn't work out, if you go a little bit further down, there's a huge parking lot that never gets used at the college. I never see cars in that parking
No,
lot.
that's Marta,
No. Further down the parking
right on
lot,
the corner.
the one on Chambly Tucker that ICP or ICT put in.
Oh, okay,
That big parking lot across from the airport that
yeah.
seems like every time I drive by there, it's just empty.
I'd like to advance this discussion. Do you guys have additional questions or comments or things we want to cover before?
My only final comment is, Chris, Tyler, I want to reiterate, we want you here. We want to partner with you. We want your jobs. There's nothing about it that we're saying we don't want. But you just have to understand, looking at it from my perspective, I made the motion and now I feel like it needs to be cleaned up.
Understand.
And it sucks that COVID happened, but I can't do anything about that. I have an obligation to the citizens of Chambly to, structure this in a way where, it makes sense.
And I really think early on, what we use kind of, I think all together and looking at jobs and Kyle Jinx's project down the street, their project was really tied to jobs more than the cost of the project. And that's really, I think, the model we built here. And so if we were coming back to you guys and saying, hey, sorry, it's only going to be 350 jobs, in our mind, we'd have been anxious to hear what you guys had to say, that maybe you want to cut it back. But the fact that we're moving the exact same number of people to Chambly, and then the benefit it's going to have financially on your city, I'm hoping you guys will kind of take that into consideration and kind of work with us to keep this at 6 million. I know we had kind of argued for a much higher number and kind of backed it back down to 6 million. We all felt good about it. And a lot of it, I think a lot of it had to do with those jobs. So I hope you guys will continue to consider that when you're kind of working through this, but I understand, Van.
Yeah, so I mean, the difference is, what we're talking about is a pool of money. So when you're talking about, instead of a straight number of years, if we had said, hey, it's going to be a straight 10-year deal, then it wouldn't matter what the valuation of the project was. You're building a smaller project, the valuation's smaller, who cares? It's the same 10 years. But since we're talking about a pool of money, as soon as you drop the value of the project, that means there's not as many tax dollars being used up each year, and that causes everything to stretch out. So that's all.
And is that a model? I know that there was a model we all looked at way back when. Is that a model that Chambly produces and looking what potential tax dollars are?
I mean, I've got a spreadsheet, but I don't know what Laura does, or actually it was Catherine.
It's Robert Land. We worked with Robert Land to do the fiscal impact analysis.
Correct. Okay.
Correct. On you, Rob.
I think he's frozen.
Nope. Did we lose him altogether?
He said this would happen at the most opportune time. So he'll be back shortly. But Brian, you are the vice pres, so if you want to keep it running.
As the vice chair, I guess it's my job to step in. I think, oh, here he is. Good, I don't have to step in for him. You back with us, Rob?
Now you're on mute, Rob.
Now you guys get to stare at my double chin from my cell phone and not my my computer.
Ball's in your court, Rob.
I guess, Rob, the question is do we want to table this till next week pending additional information is discussed?
Next month.
Next month, yes.
Defer.
Yes. Yeah, let's defer it, and then
Greenstone, Pruitt, let us know, are you guys up against time constraints? Obviously, just let us know what you guys have thing either.
So from our perspective, it would be the next step. We're tabled to next month, and we connect with you, Rob, and meet with whoever would like to connect. Is that the best next step? Okay.
I think that is, and I'd certainly recommend reaching out to the board if anybody wants to catch up with you guys, just to have further conversations. But yes, you and I, let's connect, and we'll
Okay.
figure out what the next steps are.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for coming back and presenting to us.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate your time.
Hey, Chris, don't forget to make me a host again.
So,
Thank you.
Laura, that just popped up. Do we need to get a revised economic study?
That was going to be one of my questions for Dan. If the numbers have changed, I think that we might want to look into that.
Okay.
But that may be an additional cost. So I do want to put that in front of you guys.
Fiscal impact study numbers will change because the amount of the abatement changed. It's very significant, though, that the number of jobs stays the same. That's the sort of thing that Robert Land looks at, but there will be some difference. And if it's not going to cause any delay, I think we should get one, and it's a developer cost, so why not?
Jokes aside, I do think it's important. If things have changed, we probably do need to get a revised economic impact study.
Laura, he can return that to us pretty quickly, right? He doesn't need a lot of lead time, does he?
He's working on another one now, but I think, since it is an update, he should be able to do that fairly quickly.
And Laura, if possible, let's make sure that when we talk to him, if he's looking at assuming all of those jobs are sitting in the city of Chamblee full-time each week, or if we can get the additional information on estimating how many of those jobs are sitting in Chamblee each week, just a rough number.
Okay, I will.
Laura, will you confirm that I did the right thing before we sign out?
I absolutely will. I don't look like I have as many abilities as I did before I handed them over to you. So,
what button do I? Because I see.
Chris, if you go over Laura's name, you should be able to click on something that makes her the host.
Yeah, there's 3 dots, and if you click on that, you can make me the host.
I see it. All right, that should have done it.
I did it.
That
All right.
worked. Yes, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Take care.
You too.
Moving on, consolidated annual reports.
This was a continuation of the discussion last month. We had a request from Peachtree Crossing to consider combining the annual reports. I know that Dan and I had talked about that as well. So we just want to make sure that this is a continuance of that. And just, I think we have to make an amendment, is that correct, to their MOU? Or is it how do we want to do that is what I'm asking, Dan, because I think we need to solidify that.
There is an amendment to the MOU that's required. It's been drafted. I didn't look at it for purposes of this meeting, but as a matter of, we discussed this last time, as a matter of policy going forward, what we're going to do in situations like one that we just talked about. We've been having accountability for things like jobs and investment the first quarter of the next year. And we've been wanting to get the tax number and the tax savings in the year before as soon as we can once the tax numbers are out. So that means that developers literally or technically are required to file 2 reports, and it gets a little confusing when we talk about SLX. So anything we can do to simplify this is better. So what we're going to do is to present to the board, not tonight, but at the next meeting, an MOU amendment that would align Peachtree Crossing with that process. The reports are fine. We've already accepted the reports. The MOU just does two things. The MOU amendment does two things. It memorializes the approach to determining the fair market value that we're using with them. And then secondly, it aligns the reports. So there may be two documents, but you get them at the same time. The Pruitt MOU, I was looking at that feature of it a minute ago, has that effect, but I think I need to expressly put in the current tax year requirement for the filing of both reports if the numbers are available. So that'll be already aligned when the MOU is finalized and signed. And Pruitt also, now that version has a simpler method of determining fair market value than we're using with Peachtree Crossing. You all will recall the long trip that we had to get comparables, and that was a special situation because of the big increase in value. So what we're doing now is looking at the number that the tax assessors have on the digest. There's a digest value, even though it's on the exempt digest, and we just work from that. So that's in Pruitt now, and that will be the standard going forward, as will be aligning the report so that you get them both at the same time. So that's the report on reports, the report on reports.
And I do have a quick question about that. Will that impact, because we had talked about it coming in March, will that impact when we receive admin payments if they're not being calculated as early?
Well, it will. The payments are made with the report, and I was going to have them both made in the end of the current year. So like in October of the current year instead of March of the next year.
Okay.
In fact, I think that's what the Peachtree Crossing Amendment says.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on. I don't think there's anything to do there.
No, it's
Just reports. SLX update.
All right, here we go. Let me get the SLX report up. So we have spent some time going over the 2020 report from SLX. You all will recall that our last meeting we discussed it, and I recommended not taking action one way or the other. In the meantime, we have drilled down in that and have come up with this result that the incorrect millage rate was used. You understand, we get these reports in and they've got numbers in them, and we look to see if it's consistent with the MOU and if the math is right. So we did a deeper dive in this and discovered that the millage rate was wrong, but it was an error in their favor. So the number went down from $249,116 to $246,971.83 for our admin payment, in addition to which there's $75,000 owed for the extension, for a grand total of $321,971.83. However, we have to keep track. You remember the discussion we had with Pruitt just a minute ago about the basket of credits and how much that was. Well, the effect of exhausting the basket is that you have a flip, and then we start getting payments at 100%, which means that the company will take the project out of the bond structure and start paying normal taxes because there's no savings. In order to determine that, we have to add up the cumulative savings, and the reports have to be submitted on a consistent basis. And it does not look like SLX has been doing that. In addition to which, we have been receiving a number, because we're the title owner of the property, liens that have been filed and a lawsuit to foreclose a lien. This is not the current number, but the last number I had was over $1 million, $1,125,000 something, and there was another one after the spreadsheet that I'm looking at. So what we're going to do after discussing this with Rob is to reach out to the company and their lawyers and request a sit down and to work out an agreement to handle these claims in an orderly way where we're kept informed about it, and to make the payments to the DDA that are required. And we may have to, or may not have to, I don't know, because we haven't had that meeting yet. But we may have to offer a payment schedule in order to get that done. We just feel like the DDA ought to get paid at least on a par with the company's other creditors. So I was working on that letter earlier today, and I expect to be able to circulate it to Laura and Rob and anybody else who needs a copy in the next couple of days.
You guys have questions?
Sounds like a mess.
It just has made me a big believer in simplifying the process as much as possible across all of our projects.
No comment. Other than you're right.
You need to be paying more to come. Assistance League Access Agreement payment.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk to you guys about this. So in the way that the agreement was written, it is on the Assistance League to pay part of that or pay that. And so I think one of the hangups for them assigning the agreement is the fact that that is in the agreement. And so I wanted to come back to you guys and just talk to you a little bit about that and whether or not we're willing to share any or part of that. And so, you know, I just think that's something that we need to discuss a little bit more since we've put the time and effort in. I know Safe Francis put the time and effort in to put the agreement together. And because they are being impacted fairly significantly by the Civic Center being torn down and City Hall coming online soon, hopefully. So I just wanted to talk to you guys about that a little bit tonight as well.
I'm confused. You're saying our agreement was going to force them to pay something and they're saying they don't want to pay? Is that what you're saying?
I'll jump in. So the intent of us offering an access agreement to our property to allow them to park was to basically act in good faith and be a good neighbor and, you know, get some goodwill. And in doing that, that access agreement costs money to put together. And in that agreement, the obligation gets put on the Assistance League to pay for that access agreement.
How much are we talking about? What's the dollar amount?
$3,500.
It added up to about $3,000. So
$3,000
in the grand scheme of things. And I told Laura I'd be willing to chip in too. So if we need to write that down, that's absolutely no problem.
Dan, will you be willing to take half?
Whatever you want, Van.
The DD, I would be willing to motion that the DDA pick up the entire cost if Dan is willing to cut his price in half.
or something like that.
I'm willing to do that. This is the nonprofit, and as Laura said, it's got to do with the City Hall project, and you know, this is fine. Don't worry about it.
Hey, it's funny. My proposal would have been we go thirds. You know, they pay a third, we pay a third. Dan sucks up a third.
You know, I whatever you want to do is fine, but I'm also fine with half.
I think we lose our goodwill even if we ask them to pay $1, whatever that dollar amount is.
I agree.
You know, so I think we need a motion here for the DDA. I'm assuming to pick up the payment of the agreement, and then we can work out something with Dan on how that's split up.
We just split it down the middle.
Motion for the DDA to pay half of the agreed upon cost of drafting the access agreement.
Second.
All in favor? Van?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Jonathan?
Well, wait a minute. There needs to be discussion before we vote on it.
Okay,
And I have a question. Sorry, but I do have a question.
Go ahead.
So the DDA to pay half of it, but that does not tell the Assistance League that they are not on the hook for a buck. Does that not need to be included in this vote?
I'd be glad to amend the motion if you think we need to. I assumed Laura would tell them, but I can add it to the motion.
Yeah, but if that's not what this motion says, so she can't tell them that. Motion
Okay.
that the DDA to add to your your motion that in no way, shape or form is the Assistance League going to be required to pay any of the cost of the agreement.
I accept that amendment to my motion.
I guess I was going to clean it up and say, motion that the DDA pay all of the cost and negotiate the fee with Dan McRae.
That's a better way of doing it.
There you go.
I thought that's what I said.
No, no.
Do we have a second to Brian's motion?
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
I.
Great. It's new business. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Dan. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
The sausage has been made.
And it's delicious.
That almost had as much discussion as a $6 million tax abatement.
It didn't it?
New business, Contrast Artisan Ales. So this is a bit of an update for Town Center as well. We have been talking about carving out a piece of our property to basically lease back to Contrast at no cost other than insurance, blah, 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 whatever. What I would like to do here is basically define those boundaries and maybe set a budget to basically create improvements. And I use that term loosely, really just to create boundaries so that we don't have folks going from Contrast onto the Town Center property. Anyone that gets on the property is basically trespassing. But that doesn't mean people aren't walking all over the property. So I'd like to see us put up a fence and maybe lay down some mulch. I would probably defer to Bob or Seven Oaks on cost, but I'm thinking no more than 5,000. And this would be kind of a complement to the marketing platform that Seven Oaks put up already at the front of the property, which looks great. And I think they've had some success with some recent tours out there. I'll let them talk about that. But that's essentially where this lies, is how do we clean up that little piece that we think we want to rent out to Contrast at no cost. Or if our minds have changed at all about that.
Might be cheaper to put up a hedge than a fence.
I don't have to trim a hedge or a fence.
Don't have to
You wouldn't
water
have
it
to
either.
trim you're not going to have to trim a hedge. It's not going to be that long, number one. And number two, I don't know what the city's going to say about putting up a fence because the platform had to get permitted. I don't believe that a hedge would have to get permitted.
Has Contrast agreed to take on kind of liability issues?
Yes, but you're breaking up a lot there.
Sounds like Darth Vader. Darth.
Sorry.
Father Luke.
Yeah, just worried about liability. Sounds like they're going to agree to take that on.
Yeah, that's the idea, is whatever they agree to take, they have to be insured and indemnify.
Okay, it's probably important to have a defined boundary. So a fence would work. Am I not coming in clearly? My power's not going in and out.
He said it has to be a fence and not a hedge to define a boundary.
I'm saying it.
It could be a hedge with thorns.
Leslie, I don't think it'll grow quickly enough for it to make a difference. I do think that it does need to be a fence. Doesn't have to be terribly fancy. It just needs to be something that indicates this is the boundary.
Still going to have to be permitted, but that's okay.
Probably. Bob's an expert at this point, and he said he's willing to do whatever it takes.
to get this stuff permitted for us.
Okay,
He thinks, and I'm reading Bob's mind, he thinks 5,000 is probably an appropriate number. Obviously, we want to spend less than that, but to me, I think that's where we try to start and get this wrapped up before it's winter. Do we have a motion?
Is the motion to authorize spending no more than $5,000 for improvements to the town center property for the purposes of facilitating the contrast artisan ale use of the property?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, guys. DDA change of meeting to in-person meeting discussion.
woo-hoo.
I'll preface this by saying I would love to meet in person. I think we all need to be comfortable doing that. I don't want to force anybody to make that decision, but if you ask me, I would certainly like to start meeting in person versus me having to call in after my landline drops and all that kind of stuff.
Laura, would we be meeting in the new public safety building, and is there space for us to do that?
I've inquired about that, and yes, we would be meeting in the community room upstairs. So there is public access that goes directly to that room. It's a large enough space to allow us to spread out, and I think we would be able to be accommodated very easily.
Mr. Chairman, here's a legal tidbit that may help the discussion.
Yes.
Recall that the reason we can meet virtually is because the governor has declared a state of emergency, and there's a provision in the open meetings law that allows that. Those declarations are renewed every 30 days. And the one that expires at the end of this month, I don't think is going to be renewed. There is another law that was passed and is now effective. That's House Bill 98. That effectively allows an authority to declare its own emergency. You have to make a finding that there's emergency conditions, which might or might not be difficult to do. But if we did not do that, and if the governor does not renew the declaration, then we're going to have to meet in person next month.
So what do you guys think about meeting next month?
My vote is for in-person.
In person, agreed.
Andy's been quiet. Andy, do you have any problem with it?
No problem.
I know
Okay.
Ronnie never wants to go back to in-person meetings, so
That's why I didn't ask her, because I know her answer.
She just reached through the screen.
Motion to resume meeting in person starting next month?
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Public comment.
We did not have anybody come in, and I don't see anybody from the public here.
I think after last meeting, we'd have a line out the door. Do we have a motion to enter into an executive session pursuant to OCGA 50-14-3B1 for the purpose of discussing or approving a real estate transaction?
So moved.
Motion. Go ahead, Brian.
I said so moved since he read it
Oh,
already.
yeah. Okay, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, I'm gonna put us in breakout room.
We have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
All in second? Anybody?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Good night, everyone.
Good night, y'all.
Thank you.
Good
Good
night,
night.
everybody. Good being with you.